going to be talking a little bit about forgiveness. In fact, we're going to be talking for the entire 90 minutes about forgiveness. As I told you last week, we're going to do 1 week of doing call in readings, and that's all we'll do for 90 minutes. And then we're going to do 1 week of having a class. And when we have a class, I want you to still call in and ask questions that are relevant to what we're talking about, what we're teaching, or maybe a situation that you might have in your own life. Because when we do that, just like when we're all together in a classroom setting, we learn from each other. So, my goal in this was to be able to help us move forward with our souls and our spirits rather than our egos, and to be able to understand how to do that through helping each other, and so that it's not just me talking, but it's all of us talking together. So I hope that you'll go ahead and call in and we can talk about forgiveness together tonight. Last week we talked a little bit about depression, and at this time of year, many people get depressed for a variety of reasons. Some of it is because of childhood dynamics and holidays being stressful and parents having a stressful time, and that kind of clicks in, or trying to keep up with the Joneses, or trying to get gifts when there's no money, and all those kinds of things. So I hope that your holiday shopping and your season is going well, and that you're reaching out to whomever you know that may be struggling right now with some depression or some anxiety about the season, and helping them to spend a little time, or just reach out, maybe have them over for a glass of wine, a cup of coffee, or just, talking on the phone a little bit and encouraging them to spend a little time if they're feeling some depression. So, um, you know, uh, forgiveness is an interesting topic. Because there's a lot of reasons why we don't forgive. One of the reasons is because we feel like if we're going to forgive somebody, that means that we have to forget about it. And that's not it at all. If you're not forgiving, what you're doing is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's what resentment is that you're holding on to energy that's not serving you. It's really poisoning you. It's polluting your chakras. It's polluting your soul. It's not allowing you to move forward. It's like dragging energy behind you that isn't allowing you to make the movement. So when you're in a position where you haven't forgiven someone and you're still holding on to old anger and old resentment, what you're really doing is harming yourself rather than them. What happens in life with karmic patterns is, we start creating patterns in our life from childhood, and we attract, because the law of attraction is an absolute law, from childhood patterns, and we repeat those patterns over and over again. So we start to feel betrayal even if there's not betrayal, if we felt like we've been betrayed. So that's why it's important to start working with forgiveness, so that you can start releasing whatever it is that's holding you up, and that you are working through your karmic patterns and not repeating those patterns. And you're able to make movement and balance and harmony for yourself. So, it's easy to talk about forgiveness, but how do you do it? Like, how do you forgive somebody that's maybe cheated on you? Or how do you forgive somebody that's stolen from you? How do you forgive your child who has maybe killed themselves? That's a really tough one, because, there is a big piece of having forgiveness in that. How do you forgive a parent for not being a good parent? How do you forgive a sibling who has not lived up to the expectations that you have each other's back? How do we do that? How do we make that kind of movement? And basically, you have to start understanding how to neutralize that energy. You have to start understanding how to stop taking things personally. You have to start understanding what you learned from the process. That's how you move into forgiveness. So I have a little story for you that I think is an interesting little story. I got to put my glasses on. So, two Buddhist monks on their way to the monastery found an exceedingly beautiful woman at the riverbank. Like them, she wished to cross the river, but the water was too high. So one of the monks lifted her onto his back and carried her across. His fellow monk was thoroughly scandalized. For 2 hours, he berated him at his negligence in keeping the rule. Had he forgotten he was a monk? How did he dare touch a woman? And worse, carry her across a river? What would people say? Had he brought their holy religion into disrepute? The offending monk listened patiently to the never-ending sermon, and finally he broke in and said, "Brother, I dropped that woman at the river. Are you still carrying her?" And that's how forgiveness goes. Sometimes we're carrying something over and over, and we keep bashing our heads against a wall about it, or berating ourselves over something that we said or did, and I'm not forgiving ourselves, or we keep holding somebody else accountable for some of their behavior, which maybe they didn't have a recognition of, or even if they did, it wasn't with the intention of being harmful to you. And we carry that over and over and over again until it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So, my first suggestion is to sit down and make a list of some repeating energies in your energy field of times that you should have forgiven, that those energies keep coming back to you over and over again in your karmic profile. And sometimes when that reoccurring pattern happens, it gets worse and worse, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and you find a harder and harder time being able to make that forgiving factor happen. So I always use my family of origin as a form of teaching. So I want to talk to you about my mother and father. There were four of us girls in my family. I'm the third. I have two older sisters and one younger. And my parents did something called triangulation. And what that meant was that my mother had two favorites and my father had two favorites. So the two favorites were of my father's, at least that's what appeared to me, because my perception of the truth is my perception. My sister's perception of the truth may be different. But in my perception of the truth, my father favored my sister Susan, the oldest, even though they had a very contentious and difficult relationship when she was a child. In fact, I would say that my father was rather abusive to her. But I came 9 years later, so he didn't have that same kind of energy on me. But then I would be the second one that was favored by my father. And my mother's children were Kristen and Lisa. And I say it that way because that's how I honestly felt. Like my mother's children were my second sister and my fourth sister, and that my father's children were the first and me. And so they triangulated us. So what happened is that because we were triangulated, when we grew up, we created situations in which there were triangulation. And so when I need to work on is when I get into a situation where I'm triangulated by somebody, or I'm put in a position where somebody's talking about another person to me and they're kind of getting us to take sides. Because you see, my parents got us to take sides. So it would always be that my father would talk about my mother, or my mother would talk about my father, and we'd start taking sides. So when I grew up and got married, what happened was is that I married somebody who had a father that was an alcoholic and a mother who was rather hard on him. He felt insecure within himself. So he actually really was somebody that needed a lot of female attention. So he would step out of the marriage frequently. And it was the perfect storm for me to be in a triangulated situation again, where I was competing with another woman in order to get attention, which is what I did when I was a child. So I've had to work at forgiving my parents at that level. My parents didn't mean to have that happen, of course. And I had to work at forgiving myself for repeating those patterns over and over again in my adult life. So, in my level of understanding of it, I had to do some serious work on what that meant. Did my mother love me any less than my other two sisters? No, not really. I was a more independent child than they were. That's why my father liked me better. And so it was one of those kinds of things where my mother was giving attention to the girls that needed it. And my father didn't want to give attention to somebody that was needy, so he preferred to be with two more independent people. And so I've watched that pattern repeat over and over and over again in my life. So, in order to forgive myself or to forgive my parents, I've had to look at it and really recognize it and work on it consistently, writing some things down and figuring out what that all means, and learning how to neutralize that energy and not repeat those patterns. But I'll tell you what, the most interesting thing about a karmic profile is those patterns in your karmic profile do repeat no matter what. And so it's not that your karmic profile is ever going to change. Even when you work on forgiveness, even when you work on yourself and find a way to make movement so you can neutralize energy, because that's really all that forgiveness means, is that you're just neutralizing energy. Even with that, your karmic profile remains the same. So even in my current life, I have a situation where there's been a triangulation. And that's still part of my everyday life right now as I'm trying to work through that and understand what that means to me and why I'm still attracting it. I'm not attracting it in the same way that I used to. It's a different energy because I have done the work on it, and I have neutralized it, and I have forgiven it. But that karmic pattern remains the same. So there are reasons why we choose not to forgive that I want to talk to you about. And again, our phone number here is 602 875 0444. And I would love for you to call in and share your story or ask some questions about forgiveness or chime in with me so that we can make this an interactive 90 minutes rather than me just rambling on to you. I really want to have you be part of this. So, one of the reasons that we don't forgive is because truly people often like to stay in victim mode. Why? Because being in victim mode does not allow you to take personal responsibility. You can be a blamer, it's the other person's fault. And then you're not taking your own responsibility for your side of it. And in not taking your own personal responsibility in it, you can excuse yourself from moving into a neutralized energy, finding what the meaning of the situation was and how to work into forgiveness. So that's a really important piece is to not remain a victim and to stay in victimization. Now also blah, blah. Oftentimes when we are not forgiving, we are remaining a victim to a situation. So that's an excuse, and it doesn't allow for you to make movement in your energy field. So the phone is ringing right now, and Amadeus is going to answer it.
Melinda's Angels. Yes, it should. Yes,
I guess
it should
we're
be
just
online.
having technical difficulties. I
Yes.
thought maybe we were having
you
a
get
line
hold of,
call in
Did you
to
get hold
make
of
some
Mark?
kind of a comment or suggestion with us.
Hello?
So you know the people who are the eaters of life, the ones that are always in a constant state of victimization, and they don't want to forgive, and they don't want to make
Yeah, check
movement,
with Mark
and they want
to
to
see
stay
why.
in
It
that
should be
place
up live.
of being not responsible for moving
I've had a
forward.
couple other people
And
call
that,
in with it
contributes
being
to
live.
depression some too. When you have that feeling of being stuck, it means that
Okay,
you're
that
not
phone
taking
number
that
is
responsibility to move
720
forward and you're staying victim and you're not
440
forgiving for whatever it is that
3067.
you need to forgive. So that's an important piece for you is to
Okay,
learn
if
to
it
make
doesn't
sure
come
that you're
up,
not
give me
being
a
a
call
victim.
back, okay?
So the other
And
thing
let me
about
give you a
not
second number
forgiving is
to our
this
technical.
illusion that if it hadn't happened, then maybe
Let's
your
see.
life would be perfect.
That
So,
phone number is
another thing that I've had to forgive myself for has been for things that maybe I
area
have
code
done
469
in my life that I wish I hadn't.
400
So sometimes we are in denial and we tell
2531.
ourselves it didn't really happen, or we kind of reframe that. You know, people who kind of take the truth and reframe it, and their truth is actually not the truth. We all do that. We all do that. And then we make energy that contributes to difficulty with
That's coming soon.
putting that forgiveness in front of us. So we all do that. I got lots of buzzes and phones and stuff going on here, but so far I don't have anybody that has called in yet. So hoping that you're going to be calling in and talking to us about it. So the illusion that if you hadn't behaved this way or if that hadn't happened, that you'd have a perfect life gets in your way of making for forgiving yourself or for somebody else. Because everything in life is meant purposefully. Remember that your soul chooses your karmic profile, your soul chooses your mother and father. Your soul chooses what kind of circumstances and situations that you're going to have in your life, that you're going to learn from, that you're going to process, that you're going to hopefully have progress as your soul develops. And the key to it is to be in neutral. I'm not talking about being like a zombie or a robot, or like you're medicated and you don't have feelings. Your feelings are supposed to give you purposefulness. Your feelings are supposed to teach you something. I'm talking about understanding those feelings, integrating those feelings into what's happening in your current situation, recognizing how it is a contributing factor from your karmic profile, moving into a place where you can release it. Releasing is the energy of forgiveness, moving it into neutral so that you're not repeating those patterns over and over again. And in that process, moving your soul into a different frequency of energy so that you can rise above to where you need to be in order for you to fulfill your purposefulness in life. So those are the things that you want to be able to do through that neutralization. And that takes somebody that's very, very clear about who they are and what they're doing and not being a victim to anything that's happened, taking full responsibility. So when you are not telling yourself the truth, when you're in denial, when you're pretending that if it didn't happen, your life would be perfect, you're not really learning anything. You're just in a state of being that doesn't allow you to progress appropriately. Okay? So I think we have a phone call this time, yes? And who's on the line?
Christina.
Okay. Hi, Christina. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Do you have a comment or something about forgiveness tonight?
Well, I have a question about how to forgive. Like, how does one do that? What if when you're talking about forgiving yourself or forgiving your parents, for example, what do I do in order to extend that forgiveness?
Well, it's a situation, Christina, where it's a process that you have to go through. First of all, you have to understand that your parents are just people, or whomever you're having a difficult time with is just a person. All too often we take things personally. So I always think that you need to put paper to pen to understand exactly who you are and what you're doing. It's the same thing that we've talked about on other classes and other occasions, that you have to start knowing yourself by writing things down, meditating, praying, moving into your higher power, getting your ego out of the way, recognizing who your parents were, understanding that they were just people too, and not making it about you. Part of forgiveness is about not making it about you, which is very hard for us to do, but making it about the lesson. And that's the difference. If you can make it about the lesson and not about you personally, if you can understand that even your bad behavior, if you need to forgive yourself, is about the lesson. I think some of the things that are hardest for people to forgive are things that they feel like they've had no control over. And that takes the serenity prayer into consideration, where you have to be able to release what you can't control and send it to your higher power and let that piece go. So it's a process where you have to meditate on it, you have to journal on it. Perhaps you need to see a counselor sometimes. You have to find a place to neutral. You have to release it. Sometimes you need to write a letter to the person that you need to forgive, or write about the situation or circumstance. And you don't have to send the letter. It's just the process of writing it down that helps to make movement. Does that help, Christina?
Okay.
Do you have
It's very helpful.
Do you have a specific?
Well, mostly it's myself. I can think of countless incidents in my life where I'm kind of beating myself up still over something I did maybe years ago or said or shouldn't have done, whatever. And really, now that you've explained to me that forgiveness is a lot about knowing yourself and about the lesson, that helps me understand why it is I haven't been able to let go of that incident all this time, even though I have made an attempt to address it or let it release it or whatever. I've missed the point of making it about the lesson and not about me personally or the actual action, the actual thing that I did. It was the bigger picture.
Right. I'll tell you what, Christina, that the thing of it is that in not forgiving ourselves, it's the biggest roadblock to being able to understand and create a pure path of spirituality. It's through that beating of oneself up. I wish I didn't say that. I wish I didn't do that. I wish I hadn't allowed that to happen to me. Some of it is just allowing, some of us have high thresholds of abuse, and we allow things to happen to us, and then we're really pissed off at ourselves and haven't forgiven ourselves for, tolerating abuse for a real long time. And then we just attract another abuser, and it goes on and on and on, because the cycle will perpetuate yourself when you're not forgiving. But in that lack of self-forgiveness, it creates an energy of not being able to love oneself. And a lot of people say to me, how come I can't talk to my spirit guide? How come I can't talk to my dead mother, my dead whatever? And it's because there's an energy that blocks of not being able to forgive, neutralize, understand the lesson, and move into self-love. You know, it's an interesting process when you start to work on yourself and not make it about everybody else.
Right.
So,
And well, that's where it all begins. And yeah, we often miss that lesson. It's not taught to us.
it's not taught to us. That's right. Because, you know, it's something that we have been taught. If you forgive, that means you have to forget. It's not about forgetting. It's not about letting somebody off the hook. It's not about not taking responsibility for your own actions, but it's movement of energy that allows that responsibility to take on a different energy and adjustment so that you're freeing yourself rather than trapping yourself with it. So
Wonderful. Well, that helps me tremendously. It clarifies many things
good.
that I've been working on. So
Good.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling, Christina. Again, if you want to call, the number to call here is 602-875-0444. If you want to talk about forgiveness, you know, talking about how to release something that you've held on to that's been a bitter energy that you may have held on to for a long time kind of sounds real simple to write it down, journal about it, and meditate and pray. Those feel like simple things, but you have to understand that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is neutrality. And so when you're hating somebody, when you're having a real difficult time, when you're really angry with somebody, when you're holding yourself hostage with a situation or with a person, you're having a very strong relationship with them. You know, it's very interesting. I have clients who have been divorced and still are hating their spouse from before, even though they look like they've moved on and are happy. But the thing of it is they're still having a strong relationship with that ex, maybe even a stronger relationship than when they were married to them. And it's those people who've been able to neutralize things and put it into balance and perspective that are releasing that energy for themselves to move on and understand that karmic profile and being able to make that movement. I think we have another caller coming in.
Lisa. Transfer.
What? You got transfer? Ready? We got it? Are you there, Lisa?
Yes.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for calling in. Do you have something to comment about forgiveness?
Sort of a comment / question, I suppose.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Do I ask you?
Go for it. Go for it, kid. Go for it.
Okay. So I'm just curious. Well, I guess my comment was that there's a couple of people that I've forgiven in my life, but I feel like it's a process. Like I feel like, oh yeah, I'm good there, and then someone will either ask me what happened, and then I'll tell them the story of what happened, and then their reaction reminds me of like how horribly awful it was, and then I start getting like, yeah, that was super uncool, and then I kind of start over again.
Yeah.
And so, I guess I'm just kind of wondering if that's normal.
Well, not only is it normal, but it's just a really great question. I really appreciate that you called in and asked it, because I think there are layers of forgiveness, like peeling layers of an onion. And it goes back to where we were talking about your karmic profile to begin with. So if you were punched in the arm over and over and over again as a child, if as an adult somebody punches you in the arm, you're going to go, ow, and it's going to hurt real bad. But if you were never punched in that arm as a child and somebody punches in the arm, you're just going to go, ow, what do you hit me for? So there's a lot of difference in how that energy works. And so sometimes the things that we need to forgive trigger us back to other issues. So for example, Lisa, I feel that in your energy field that you have issues of abandonment. So let's just say that in those issues of abandonment, you've had some of that feeling of being let down or betrayed by people in your life over and over again. And then as it happens and it keeps happening, then it's harder and harder to forgive. And those layers that you have to work through are are more. There are more layers to work through. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. So what you have to do, Lisa, is you have to work at forgiving your own karmic profile first, understanding that what you've been learning is that you are never abandoned by anything within you and your connection to God, which I think, again, is something that you're working on, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so.
You know, it's interesting. My partner snapped a picture last night as he was driving home, and sent it to me. And I put it on my Facebook today, and he didn't even realize it. And he snapped a picture of an angel that was watching over him. And so if you'll pop on my Facebook, Melinda Vail, rather than Melinda Vail Incorporated, but Melinda Vail, you're going to see this picture, and there's an angel looking down, I'm assuming at him in the car, with arms in a prayer-like position above him. And it's so interesting how we miss that. So I just put the picture out and to see what people would say, and they said beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then I put a comment, there's an angel in it, and then people said, I see it, I see it, I see it. And a lot of times when we have issues of feeling abandoned as part of our karmic profile, we even feel abandoned sometimes by the universe or by God. And we have to remember that that never abandons us, that we're always connected to God, that we're always connected to the other side, that we're always connected to our loved ones no matter what, and that sometimes people here on the planet are mean to each other because they don't know any better.
Right.
So I don't know if that helps, but you also had another comment or question besides that. I don't know if that helps you, Lisa. I just feel like you're working at a very high level of connecting to God, and that you've worked through issues of pain and abandonment.
Yes, oh, for sure. For sure. I work with issues with I'm estranged from my father and feel very rejected by him. And then my boyfriend committed suicide. So it was kind of another form of, it felt like he left, obviously, and it's been a kind of mess. So it's this ongoing process of forgiveness. And I just feel like it's such a process. And I hopefully it's okay that it takes a little longer than than it maybe is supposed to.
Well, I don't think there's any supposed to's when somebody leaves the planet in that manner, you know.
Right.
Most times, Lisa, when I talk to people who've died that way, what they are feeling at the time is that the world is better off without them, or they feel like they're doing somebody a favor rather than the opposite. It's very misguided energy for sure. And I think
Right.
that those layers of forgiveness are multifaceted. And I appreciate that you called in and shared this with everybody that's listening. And if you don't mind, I'd like to address what some of those forgiveness aspects are in regards to suicide. Because I think, Lisa, and I'd like you to chime in since you've been gracious enough. And by the way, forgiveness puts us into a place of grace, but you've been gracious enough to share with us. I think that it's not just that you're forgiving your loved one for leaving the planet in that way, but there's also all kinds of layers of blame and self-doubt that you place on yourself, is there not?
Yes, because the suicide happened right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I struggle daily with how that all happened.
I understand that. So, Lisa, I'm going to say a couple of things that may sound hard to hear for a minute. Are you willing to go there with me?
You betcha.
Okay. So if in the reframe of what happened to you, you and the spirit of this man had some kind of an agreement in heaven, some kind of an understanding that his process would help you with your process. And that somehow that the two souls decided that even though this seems like the worst possible thing that could happen to anyone, that it moves you into a place where you are a different person, a person that has made a deeper connection to herself and maybe even to this man from, I'm going to say the gift. That's why this is going to be hard to hear, the gift in what he did with you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand that there's been gifts that have come from that for you?
I totally get that. Yeah,
Okay.
I've been reading a lot of books that have helped me understand that whole concept of having made an agreement prior to coming here and that all of that. So it's getting easier to understand.
Sure. And I'm thinking you're still pissed off at him for giving you the gift. I mean, I'd be pissed off at him, that's for sure. Yeah. I mean, like, well, you know, thank you very much for trusting me with this gift. I mean, it sucks, but in the reframe, there is still some gifts in that. There are still some levels of moving at a spiritual place into a soul level, maybe a place where you have unequivocal knowledge that there's life after life, because there may be signs that he gives you and connections that continue. You may have moved closer to your own source in order to get through this. There may be so many things about this that we don't understand from a human perspective unless we move into our soul. And so I think that as you reframe this, that's part of the forgiveness factor. You know, people say, how do you forgive? Well, you have to find the reframe. And I know it sounds trite, but you have to find the silver lining, even in something as devastating as what you've been through. And it feels like that's what you're trying to do.
I am. I can easily get into the trap of, like, this was so horribly awful that I hope the redemption of it is huge. And then I remember that I'm not owed anything, like the universe doesn't own anything. And then I try to get back to, okay, I'm just going to be grateful that I'm still here. I'm grateful for the little things in life. I'm grateful, you know, so gratitude, forgiveness. But I bounce back and forth. I'm constantly trying to figure it out, like to figure out this puzzle. Like, if I made this agreement with him, why would I have done that? What is going to come out of it? And so it's quite multifaceted.
Oh my goodness, yes. My goodness, yes. I love some of the things that you're saying about the gratitude involved, and understanding that there's gratitude involved in the worst of circumstances, that you can still find light somehow. And I think you're well on your way to making a place of balance and harmony for yourself. And I think you've probably already forgiven this man. And there may be other rounds of needing to forgive him again, and yourself, and you may still peel layers of this for a while. You know?
Okay, and that's what I was kind of wondering about. Just, I guess it makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Because I do feel guilt when, and I know guilt is not something God wants us to feel, but I do feel guilty when all of a sudden I'm mad at him again, and I've already forgiven him, and I'm like, okay, here we go again. You know, so that does make me feel better. Thank you.
Let me ask you this, Lisa. When you're mad at him, what do you do with it?
You know, to be honest, I talk to him.
Good job. Good job.
I cannot believe you did this. Like, it cannot. Of all of the things you could have done, that wasn't it.
Good job.
You know, and then I realized, well, it was it, because if that's the way it happened. But I have this conversation, and my words seem to bounce off the walls, but I have it anyway.
Well, you know, I don't think they bounce off the walls. And I think if I were in your position, I'd be going, you son of a bitch. I mean, are you kidding me? You really are you put me through this? You're really? And it's okay to feel that. And it's okay to say that. But what happens is, with many people, is that when they're in that state of, oh, I'm really mad at you and I want to verbalize it and I want to let you have it right now, then they feel, oh my God, well, he must have been in so much pain and he's gone and I'm guilty. And I don't feel guilty for honest and real emotions. God gave us anger to direct us, to give us a map, sometimes to fuel us into a place of being able to have that energy to move forward. It's okay to be angry sometimes. You can be angry and still be in a state of forgiveness. It's when you're angry with resentment that holds you hostage that you haven't forgiven. Does that make sense?
I get it.
Okay.
It totally makes sense. Yeah,
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you for calling in. I hope that everybody appreciates Lisa calling in, because that's a big deal to share with us tonight, and that's a tough one. So thank you very much for calling, Lisa.
Thank you.
You have a happy holiday, okay?
You too. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
So statistically, it's not the first year that is hard when you've lost somebody that you love. It's the second year. The first year you're going through all the first birthday, the first anniversary, the first Christmas without, the first whatever. And so you're kind of in a fight or flight. You've got adrenaline getting you through the first year. The second year is when grief hits you the hardest. But when one is going through the loss of someone through suicide, the curve, the process, the ability to find balance, that takes a whole lot longer, sometimes as many as 7 or 8 years. There is a wonderful group here in town, a couple of different groups, but the suicide survivor group just had a walk on Sunday, and they do that in early December every year to raise funds for awareness of what to look for suicide and to help people understand how to process. And many families come together trying to make some kind of a way of connecting so that there can be movement and forgiveness and allowance. So we really thank Lisa for calling. Amadeus is here with me, and he has a book that he wrote, and it's called The 21 Irreverent Truths of Life by Amadeus. And he wrote a chapter on forgiveness, and I'd like him to chime in a little bit with us tonight and tell us his opinion on what forgiveness means to him.
Well, forgiveness is actually taking a look at yourself first, because forgiveness has to come from within, and then deciding whether or not forgiveness is something that the person that you or entity that you need to forgive or want to forgive can receive. You have to decide if you can give, if they can receive. You also have to figure out whether or not you have righteous indignation, and whether or not you can be upset and angry and demand some degree of retribution. Forgiveness isn't just about rolling over and playing dead. You have to understand that forgiveness is a tool that is used to clean or cleanse, to love, and also to acknowledge who you are on the inside. One of the things Melinda talks about is karmic responsibility and karmic profile. And you need to take a look at yourself once again to decide how and where this fits in with karmic profile. One of the things that also I've discovered about forgiveness is that for those folks who do not practice forgiveness and instead choose to justify their actions continuously over and over again, they put themselves into a dark place. And when you're in a dark place and you justify time and time again, it becomes more and more difficult to dig out of that dark place. So forgiveness and exercising forgiveness for those folks isn't something that they can actually do until they begin to cleanse who they are first. Because if you give forgiveness, it has to come from a clean place of light. It can't come from a sullied position. One of the questions I had while listening to Melinda was a question of dichotomy, and it's something I didn't address in my book, but the dichotomy being is that forgiveness is a process, and it's something that you have to look at from within. But instead of looking at forgiveness and all that it is attached to it, instead, if you detach, then you don't have to. So how does that work?
That's a great question, and a couple of things that you said are really great. That tar pit that we all fall into when we have multiple patterns of energy that we haven't forgiven ourselves or others for, that repeating karmic profile, it's like being stuck in tar and having difficulty to move out of it. So that's really interesting. And the other interesting thing that you said is how people pretend that they have forgiven and haven't really allowed themselves to forgive at all, but are one of these kinds of people that have a holier than thou attitude and in a condescending way think they're above the process of being able to forgive. So that's not exactly what you said, but that was my impression of what you were saying. And so I think that that's an interesting process of detachment. People who detach are still unable to make movement within themselves that allows them to process their karmic profile in a way in which they connect to their spirit and understand their purpose in life. So they will talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And they'll have repeating patterns, and they'll have issues that they can't understand why. And the reason why is because the universe keeps trying to kick them in the ass because they're detached and they're not really working the game. And you have to work the game in order to have the gain. And so you can't be so detached and so aloof and so disconnected that you're saying to yourself, well, I'm above that ability to forgive because I'm detached over here. If you do that, all it is creating more repeating patterns. So I answer that question?
Yes, that did. And, trying to work those two particulars against each other is not the easiest thing in the world. Because detachment is a comfortable place to go. Because once you're in the realm of detachment, then you don't have to look at the balance of the work that needs to be done. It's a comfortable place to be. However, it isn't a proper place to be. And when I talk about proper place to be, is that you still have that weight that you're carrying, you're just not paying attention to it. It still drags at you, even if you're not paying attention to it.
Hmm.
So,
Deepak Chopra wrote 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, and that's one of the workshops that we'll be doing here on our nights of talking. And we'll talk about the law of detachment, which is actually a pretty important law when detachment means neutralization, which is what I've been talking about earlier, that we detach in a way in which we rise above the situation or the circumstance in order to learn the lesson. That form of detachment is fine. But what we're talking about here is the kind of detachment that somebody uses not to address their own responsibility or their own issues and moves into a place where they're emotionally aloof and disconnected, which really just slams their ass into repeating patterns because the universe doesn't put up with that much, because that's a waste of a lifetime. Complacency is a waste of a lifetime. Why do you want to waste your life? If you're going to make mistakes, make a hell of a good one, make a lot of them, go big or go home. Just, learn, and don't just, glide along in life and pretend that nothing is happening to you. If it's through the real living and the juicy parts of living and understanding and needing to forgive that we move our soul into the process of raising our vibrational frequency into levels of not having to put up with so much stuff here on the planet.
another question comes up is, some people who like to forgive things that were never transgressed against them, things that have happened in the past to other people, but they feel obligated that they have to forgive other people for things that they never did. That sounds like a backwards way of saying that, I didn't do it, you weren't harmed by something I didn't do, but you're saying that I need to forgive something I had nothing to do with, and it happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago. How can I stretch there?
Mm-hmm.
Do I even need to stretch there?
Well, it's interesting. What comes to my mind when you're talking about that is recently I saw a post on the Facebook where there was a ceremony where they were dressed in Civil War or, clothing and apologizing to Native Americans for some of the atrocities that were happened in that time where there was, marching across the country and doing what we did to the Native Americans. I don't know, Amadeus, if there isn't some value to that in regards to DNA and generational connections and patterns and the way the Native Americans feel, and you know more about Native American culture than I do, but the way the Native Americans feel is in honor of their ancestors. So maybe the representation was representation of both sides in honor of all the ancestors. I don't know. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, that kind of, energy or not.
I'm trying to wrap my arms around how a people can carry something forward as a group of people or a soul group that reincarnates from generation to generation, and then somewhere down the line, somebody has an aha moment. They say, "Oh my God, I need to reach out across to a soul group over here," and
But maybe that person that's reaching out across the soul group was their own ancestor. You know, maybe because we reincarnate through the same family line often. So maybe they were an original perpetrator. And there's something in their DNA that moves them to feel like they are the one that needs to stand up and right some kind of a wrong. It depends on how it's done and what intentions are behind that, I would suppose, in that regard. You know? It's interesting. I had a psychiatrist that came to see me once, a beautiful, beautiful man. Interestingly, a dedicated psychiatrist, which I don't always feel that psychiatrists are all that. But anyway, he was, and he loved his patients, and he came to me and he said, I want to do some past life regression therapy because I'm sure I was something bad in a past life, and I want to make sure I clear it because I can feel it within me. I know I can feel it within me. So we did some past life regression therapy, and turns out that in a past life he had been a Spanish conquering in Florida, and he saw himself with a sword chopping off the head of Indians, and he needed to forgive himself for something in this lifetime, but he didn't know what it was. He just knew he had to forgive himself until he did a past life regression. So that's an interesting thing too. Sometimes, you know, there may be something within you that you feel that you have to forgive, and you just don't know what it is. And it could come through your DNA. It could come from a past life situation. It could come in a way in which you have to clear it without
What's your name, please?
knowing exactly what you're clearing at. So I think that's an interesting concept that maybe when people are drawn to talk about forgiveness for a whole people or a whole population, maybe that was part of their reincarnation process. We have another caller.
Jane.
Oh, very good.
I'll transfer.
Thank you. Let's see if I can do this. Jane, are you there?
Hi, I am. What's up?
How are you, Jane?
I'm good.
Good.
Christina?
This is Melinda.
How are you? Oh, hi. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm watching you on TV. You're still talking. Okay, so I had
Turn down your volume.
I'm supposed
Oh,
to
no,
turn
no,
down
no.
my...
No, have Jane turn.
Just speak up, Amadeus. Amadeus says, turn down your volume, okay?
Oh, I'm in another room now.
Oh, there you
Once
go.
you're on
Perfect.
the phone, I'm like, it'd be too confusing to try and watch you still talking.
that old chew gum and walk process, right? Gotta forgive yourself for that, Jane. How can I help you tonight, sweetheart?
Okay, so you're talking about forgiveness, and then a comment was made, and I can't remember exactly what it was now, but something to the effect of, okay, so I think, right, in my head that I have forgiven a person, and I obviously choose just not to even engage anymore in that relationship. So does that mean I've really forgiven them? Or when you're forgiving, you're supposed to be like, oh, okay, so we can go back and hang out now. And
I love you, Jane.
so
I love you, Jane. That's a great question. Okay. Actually, it's really the opposite. Sometimes forgiveness means that you need to actually not associate with the person that you've forgiven because maybe they have an incapability of making that movement with you. And they may continue to have some toxic exchange with you, and there's a repeating of patterns. When we keep toxic people in our life for any reason, what happens is the universe, which is a feeling energy and not a thinking energy, will feel like that's okay with you, like you are good with toxic people. So the universe may send you one or two more just to give you a good run of it, okay? So a lot of times forgiveness means that you do put somebody at a distance, or you do, in the proper word use of detachment, you do detach from that person and not have them in your relationship anymore. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you suddenly become buddies again. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to get together on holidays or have dinner together, it means that you're no longer giving the power of your energy or attention over to the person or to the situation that once was toxic to you. You have neutralized it. And that you can wish
Okay.
that person well, but also release them.
Yeah, and I do. It happens to be a married family member, so it made it a little. I had to go back a few times and relearn the. Okay, I really need to keep you at distance. You're just not. But I felt like, had to give it more chances because it was a stepdaughter basically. So.
One of the most
But
difficult
it's still
things,
kind of,
right? Yeah.
yeah, but it still kind of has energy with it because, now she has a couple of kids, obviously some other grandchildren, but distance is a wonderful thing.
Okay, but can you, well, first of all, does you detaching from your stepdaughter affect your relationship with your husband?
No, he gets it.
So,
but it's his daughter, so he has to engage.
okay, well, he doesn't have to, but I believe that if you're chosen as somebody's parent, you do have responsibilities around how you want to make that connection. And if you're a stepmother, it doesn't mean that you have that same obligation. So you can keep that distance and not allow it to affect you. Okay. Our families, our family of origin and the families that we marry into are the biggest karmic energies that we have. And you'll notice that you attract through similar situations from your parents. So I can't tell you how many times I've married my mother, but enough times that I think that it's done. And because my mother didn't make a connection with me that I felt was love, so I've always attracted somebody where I've had to prove that I was lovable. And so in family of origins, you have to look at who you're married and what does that stepdaughter represent from your own family of origin. Have you ever looked at that?
I wouldn't even know how to look at that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know where to start.
Well, you start by.
She's nothing like my family.
Okay, so can you tell me real quickly what your family was like? Like, what was your mother like? What was your father like?
My mom was phenomenal. My dad I didn't know until I was in my late 20s.
And why didn't you know your dad?
He left.
Okay.
And then, came back into the picture. And, we got along great. It, obviously took a while to get to know him. But, yeah, my mom, my sisters, we're still, well, my mom's gone, but my sisters and I are extremely close. Always have been, except for, those childhood things. But, so, yeah, the whole being married thing with all of that came along with it was a totally different, that was stuff I saw in soap operas. That was never a real life for me growing up or anything. That was all new to me.
So, Jane, in my way of thinking, even though once you found your father, he had matured to the level where you and he could have a decent relationship as both of you being grown-ups, there would be still part of your vibrational frequencies, part of your subconscious mind, that would have felt abandoned by your father not being part of your life. Correct?
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay, so then there's part of you that inside of you from your subconscious mind, recognizing that your subconscious mind is what makes you blink and breathe and digest, and you don't realize you're blinking, breathing, or digesting unless you get something in your eye or you drive past a dairy farm or you have a tummy ache, and then you realize that those things are happening, but normally they just happen on their own. So your subconscious mind has a belief in some form or fashion that children get abandoned. Do you follow me?
I do. I'm just trying to place myself in that feeling.
Okay. So remember what we talked about earlier about detachment and denial and that kind of thing. So have you forgiven your father? I guess the answer would be yes, because you reconnected with him and created a relationship. But has your inner child forgiven him?
I believe so.
Okay. So
But again, is that truth or is that denial?
I don't know because I don't know you, right? And we're kind of doing a little therapy here on the internet. But let's just say, for the sake of talking, that I would say to you, since I've been 25 years a life coach and a hypnotherapist, that probably if I hypnotize you, your inner child would feel a little bit abandoned, okay? And even though
Okay.
you're probably an old soul, because you sound like a very well rounded old soul to me, you sound like a balanced person, there would be levels, if I did some kinesiology or muscle testing on you, that would show me that you probably believe that there was abandonment issues. So then, as a grown up, you get into a situation where in your marriage, there's cause for you to abandon your stepdaughter. It would be a repeating of patterns, even though it doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay, so if we really were going to do therapy around this, Jane, we would, I mean, like we could do that with your subconscious mind and so on and really put all those pieces of the puzzle. And I'm just giving you a little skim of the surface. But that would be some of what I would look at if I were you when I was looking at what is this happening? What is the repeating of patterns? Now, is the reason that you're estranged from your stepdaughter because she has bad behavior?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And it's behavior that you feel like you can't condone or be a part of.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely choose not to be a part of it any longer.
Okay. So that's perfectly acceptable. But understand that in your choosing, that you still have some of your subconscious thought process that allows for that choice to happen because of your own family of origin. So did Dad ever explain to you why he was MIA for your part of your life?
Yes.
And can you share that? Do you feel comfortable?
Probably not so much.
Okay. Right, so will you evaluate that piece and see how it adds up for your, add that piece into it and look at how the energy is. See, a lot of times we wanna work inside logic, and that's great. And that's what chat therapy is all about, is a logical idea of what's happened to us in our lives. But what I do as a hypnotherapist and a life coach is I look at the energy behind it. And that's a whole different bailiwick because we're really talking about the spiritual piece. So therefore, we're really talking about the energetic piece. And even though sometimes the energy is illogical, if we look at it, it creates logic, if you understand what I mean. So look at that piece around Dad and see how that adds up a bit.
Yeah, well, he totally felt like he was protecting. So for him, it was absolutely justified.
So was that denial?
For him?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think in the state of mind that he was thinking as best as he could. Was that a choice I would have made? No.
Okay. So add all those things energetically up, because you wouldn't have made that choice. I wouldn't have made that choice. I would have, crawled over hot coals to be able to see my children. I wouldn't have justified that they were better off without me. And so there was something about his behavior that was inappropriate.
Right.
Okay? So
right.
all I'm saying is
life
just,
choices.
that's right. All I'm saying is I don't want you to change your opinion of your dad. I think it's wonderful that you and Daddy have been able to bridge. That's rare, by the way, with a childhood situation like yours, that you and Daddy have been able to bridge that and make that a connection for you. You guys work through your karmic profile. So I'm not trying to change that you work through your karmic profile by any stretch of the imagination. I just want you to see how the energy fits into where you are now, because when you do that, it's going to make it easier for you to have a level of forgiveness for your stepdaughter and move the energy more into neutral, which in turn will make it easier for your husband too. That's all I'm doing right now, is helping you find that neutral.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does that make sense?
It does.
Good.
It does. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know. I think that there's really some teaching that you need to do.
Teaching?
Teaching.
Who would I be teaching, and what subject?
I just feel like that your spiritual side, that you're an example, or that you somehow teach others by your own attitude and energy.
All right.
Okay.
Is that an appointment?
So that to
Is that a
me,
life coaching appointment?
that could be. But I just want you to think about that too, because I think that sometimes there's levels of your own gifts and beauty that you miss because you're worried about other people. And even though you show other people how to behave in certain ways, it's kind of a dual energy for you, Jane. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hi. So, is your dad on the other side?
He is a year and 4 more days.
Okay, so he's coming up on his heavenly birthday, huh?
He is,
Yeah.
yes.
You know, it's interesting that even though his motives were altruistic, and once you made that connection with him, Dad never let that go, and he's still around you now.
It's so funny because I have, when you and James did the workshop a few weeks ago, or
Yes.
a month ago, whatever it was,
Yes.
I didn't realize, or maybe I didn't think about it, that he had mediumship cards up that he did with Doreen Virtue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, I have this other card. I'll just see what those are like. So I got those, and I pulled one the other day, and I said, what would my dad like to tell me, was the question.
Mm-hmm.
And it pulled out, I am one of your guides.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, he's never far from you, James. So you and Dad did bridge that karmic profile, and I'm not trying to change that. I'm just saying, look at a few pieces of your puzzle so that you can firmly neutralize the energy around your stepdaughter and move it into a place where you allow it to, move energetically through you. Okay?
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, honey. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It's interesting. I find it really interesting because, human beings have a tendency to reframe issues in childhood to serve them. I use my family of origin to teach with, but when I was a kid, I thought I had the greatest family in the world. I sincerely did. We had a cottage on a lake. I skied all the time. We had a boat, it was great. It wasn't until I had therapy that I learned that when my mother brought tea and toast into my bedroom for me before school in the morning, it wasn't because she was doing something wonderful for me. It was because she wanted to have time alone to have her cup of coffee and not have to sit and talk to me. And I just couldn't put my finger on what the energy was around that, why I didn't feel connected when she was doing such loving acts of service. And there are 5 languages of love, and so one of my languages of love is acts of service because of that. And so if I'm in a relationship with somebody and they don't show up for me and do acts of service, I don't feel loved, because that was the only way that my mother showed me love. And so I've had to work that into understanding and moving into forgiveness. I want to talk to you about someone who's come to my forgiveness workshop before, whose child was born with a birth defect. And we were going around the room and talking about who we needed to forgive. And I stopped, and this person said she needed to forgive this one and that one. And I said, you're forgetting somebody. And she said, well, who do you mean? And I said, you need to forgive your child for coming in with a birth defect. And she burst into tears. Because, that feeling of whether she had done something that caused it, whether the child was flawed, which wasn't true at all. I was born with a birth defect, by the way. Sometimes we're forgiving innocent people in ways that we don't recognize. And we're holding energy on something in ways that we don't recognize. And so stop and think about it, because it's a very interesting energy about the different nuances of different people that we have to forgive. I deal with a lot of people who have lost children. The people who've lost children to suicide, they know they have to forgive their child. The people that have lost children to drug addiction, they know they have to forgive the child. It's the people that lose little children little girls and boys that have died from cancer. It's very hard for them to wrap their heads around the fact that they have to forgive that child for being sick. And when I first say that to them, they're just absolutely appalled by the thought. My God, what do you mean I have to forgive my child? Well, yeah, you have to forgive your child in the situation, the karmic profile, and whatever it was, in order to be able to make movement and understanding as to what that karma was between the two of you. So forgiveness is such an interesting nuance of energy. And I so appreciate the callers that we've had in and some of the different things that they've talked about. When you have somebody in your life that is a constant truth stretcher, you know, the people that wouldn't know the truth if it hit them in the forehead with a baseball bat, and you maintain a relationship with them, and they continue to stretch the truth, and you continue to maintain a relationship with them until something happens where it ends up having a big clash, a big drama, and all of that kind of stuff. Tell me why, as human beings, we don't nip that stuff in the bud. Why don't we stop that right as it happens? Do you have any ideas, Amadeus, why that people will perpetuate the nature of toxic relationships and not move out of them?
Sometimes I guess we just like to beat ourselves up. We think that we deserve to be beat.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we come into this world, we come in with a clean soul, but we have our karma to work through. And if part of that program is, you know, I feel like I need to continue to beat on myself, then you will do that instead of acknowledge it, accept it, and then realize that you need to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to look it directly in the face and understand that this is a deep-rooted aspect as to the reason for your existence here. And this is part of the cleansing of your soul. You come in nice and clean anyway, but it's part of what you have to do to make sure that when you step off this planet, that you've done your due diligence to your own soul.
You know, deserve is a very important word. A lot of people feel like they don't deserve the release that forgiveness gives them. And so that's why they hold on to resentment. In that state of resentment, it becomes a personality profile. They maintain that victim stance, and they don't feel like they deserve to have that ability to feel free. So they anchor themselves with resentments and levels of grudges. There are people who hold grudges all the time, and will stop connecting to others and hold a grudge forever, thinking that they're harming the other person, but they're really harming themselves because they don't feel like they deserve to be free of all that. You know, sometimes we do come into this world, though, with that karmic profile that creates the necessity for us to forgive, like the psychiatrist who came in and had to forgive his past lives, you know, knowing that he had something dark within him, but he didn't know what. It's important to be able to see all aspects. Sometimes the soul doesn't come in with that clean energy. Sometimes they come in with energy that trails from a past life connection. Sometimes somebody from a past life may hold resentment towards another person who was part of that past life and have no idea why they hold resentment. And it can be something from a past incarnation.
And that must be part of that soul family agreement that, you know, I need you to help me and I will help you, no matter how difficult or ugly it seems.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is to acknowledge that the difficult things are those things that you asked for this time around, so that you could accomplish the things that you need to do in order to be clean to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding position in place.
I want to talk about passive-aggressive people. I want to talk about passive-aggressive people because passive-aggressive people are more likely to not be able to forgive because of being in denial or in detachment. We've got a phone call coming in, so we're gonna get to this in
Melinda,
just a second after we answer this caller.
Okay, Kathy, please hold.
Kathy's on the line, so just a second. We're gonna get through this, so just a second. And we'll talk to Kathy as Amadeus switches us over. Hi, Kathy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, good. So, do you have a thought or an idea about forgiveness and the idea that without forgiveness we remove the joy factor out of our lives?
Yes, I actually had a question that was related to circumstance.
Okay.
So instead of a person, it's related to the circumstance of events. And it's, in my case, it's related to the incredible feelings I went through with the election. And I just am still trying to work that through because now I'm going into Christmas with my family and I have to be ready for that kind of thing. And I'm still resolving all that. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh gosh, Kathy, your phone call is great because I need to write a letter to Donald Trump and thank him for all the money he's made me because I've had because he's already improving my economy because I've had clients that I've had from years ago that have called me and said, I just need to talk to you about the election.
Please, God, help me. I need a morsel. I needed a bite. It's so sad. I know. But I really am never political. I don't care. I just have never been that.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's almost on an energetic, on a higher vibration problem. Like I believed a thing and then even God was failing. I don't know. I just can't even say that that's true either. I don't know.
Well, no matter which side of the aisle that you're on, this was definitely a lightning rod election, that's for sure. And, whether you were for Trump or against Trump or for Hillary or against Hillary, it brought out some real deep emotions. And I want to say to you that that's what it was supposed to do. And that it was supposed to move and shake people out of complacency, regardless of one way or the other. So for all the people who supported Trump and are happy that he is being elected, don't get into complacency and allow things to roll without being able to still find your voice. For those people who were against Trump and have some real ill feelings about what may happen in this country, don't move into complacency. Start talking. This election was to start our process to reignite energy between us, not in divisiveness, but in collaboration. But just like any other situation on this planet where there's duality involved, we have a choice.
Yeah.
We have a choice to stay divided. We have a choice to be collaborative. Okay, so it's definitely a situation that we have to move into evaluating our own role on how divisive our rhetoric is going to be, or how angry we're going to maintain our energy, or whether we're going to roll up our sleeves and do something about it. And that's all it was supposed to do. That's all this election was supposed to do. Is it's supposed to create collaboration rather than divisiveness, even though it looks like it created divisiveness, because what comes down must go up on this planet. So that's a law on this planet. This is a planet of duality. So for those of you who feel very down about the election, all you can do is know that you're going to go up.
Okay. Then, that I have been coming to terms with that. I wanted to be able to stay in that. And then I just listened to you as you were speaking about neutrality is not necessarily a good word because it just means you're not addressing things. But I do need to face an entire Republican family next week, and I'm thinking, mine was on the other side. Obviously, there's an obvious conversation, but the question then, I did know that it is important that we shook it up. Staying the same was just never going to get us anywhere anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept thinking that we were going so high spiritually, and you're right, duality. I've forgotten it, so I need to
ask them why. Ask them why, Kathy. Ask them why. Okay, Kathy, I recognize your voice. I know who you are, sweetheart.
I know, darling.
So I just want to say, as a doctor, you would look at every aspect of whatever the disease was in the body in order to find the cure. And so
Yes.
if you feel like this is a disease situation, perhaps you should ask those who think the disease is good why they think so you can find the cure within yourself. Do you
Oh, to
understand?
pull my stuff. Yeah,
Yes.
to address my own stuff.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
You get it?
Yeah. And,
Okay.
Yes, and that was the problem, is I was trying to control another person's personality, which is not appropriate. And
Right.
I knew that, but my patients are devastated. I'm having so much trouble with getting them to, it's okay, we're going to be fine. And that's exactly what I say, what you told me, is we needed to shake it up and we need to look at the whole duality of who we are and what we tolerate, what we don't, and what we want to do with the world. I get out of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay. So that's what you
put
need to
myself
do.
in their
So
shoes.
at Christmas dinner, if they're talking politics, listen, maybe you might learn why they think that he's going to be good. And maybe you'll agree and maybe you'll disagree, but at least you'll know what you're dealing with and how to make movement within yourself. And then
That's
if
right.
there are changes that are being made that you don't like, that then don't be in complacency. There's a big difference between neutrality and complacency. Complacency is not doing anything about it. Neutrality means that you're leveling the playing field in a way in which you're able to play.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, got it.
All right.
Yep, I do. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a happy
Appreciate
holiday,
it.
Kathy. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye. Bye.
You too. Thank you.
Yep.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for all the questions. I know that we're, still kind of working on this, and you can't see Amadeus when he's talking to me, and we're working on this, but it's growing and it's going to be good. Next week, we're going to do a night of readings again, so tell your friends, and we're going to do that every other week, and then Christmas week there will be no connection, and then right after which I think it's the third, fourth is a Wednesday, and we'll be doing another class at that time. Before we close down for the night, I started to talk to you about people who are passive aggressive. And the reason that that's being brought up in a situation with forgiveness is because it's really hard to put your finger on the passive aggressive people. So I belong to the passive aggressive club. I learned that really, really well, especially with humor and sarcasm. So I was reading a book called The Emotionally Abusive Relationship. And I read a chapter on an emotionally abusive relationship where it talked about somebody using humor to be emotionally abusive. And I thought, holy shit, that's me. I do that. I use humor to put somebody down or to be, sarcastic and think I'm funny and cute, and it's actually hurt somebody's feelings. I do that. So I belong to that passive aggressive club, and I've had to look at that piece within myself and forgiven that I learned that from, guess who? My mother again. But I have to work at that so that I'm not sarcastically putting somebody down or using humor in an abusive way. But people who are chronically late, they are passive aggressive. It's interesting because my daughter, who is an MSW, and she won't let any of us forget it. Because she had such a hard time in high school because she's got attention deficit disorder, and she did her master's, she did her bachelor's and her master's in 3 years flat, 4.0, part-time job, raising a kid. So she's constantly reminding us that she's got her master's degree, but she's late. She's chronically late. She was so late that at times Elliot would get in trouble in school because his mother was late. That's passive aggressive behavior. That's about control issues. Sarcasm, put down humor, doing things that annoys someone, but doing it anyways. Those people that are constantly doing that, and you're asking them not to do it. I was sitting in a situation with somebody yesterday, and the person was clicking their pen, and it was in a courtroom situation, and the one lawyer said to the other lawyer, "Quit clicking your pen, would you?" Because that was annoying. So the lawyer that was clicking his pen was trying to distract the lawyer that was talking. That kind of thing. Banging things around and making noise, accidentally breaking something or losing something that belongs to somebody else, looking through people instead of looking to people, talking down to people, sulking, giving pained smiles, not paying attention to what's going on around you, embarrassing people or drawing unwanted attention to them. I know that one time I was with somebody and I kind of he was saying something that was kind of off color, and I kind of nudged him under the table, and he said to everybody, "Why are you kicking me under the table?" So, that kind of thing. Gossip. Ooh, gossip. That's really interesting. People who gossip about other people are usually very insecure and want other people to give them attention. Causing disturbances or forgetting something that you've been asked to do. Those are passive aggressive behaviors. And so if you have any of these behaviors, I want you to look at that energy and see where it came from so you can move into a place of forgiveness and neutrality so that you don't do that anymore, so that your relationships are better for you. One of the best things that you can say to somebody if you're having difficulty in a relationship and you don't know how to communicate is just to tell the person, I just don't know what to say right now. I'm not emotionally prepared to discuss this right now, because that lets the other person know you don't know what the hell's going on with you and you got to figure it out. And if the other person is not passive aggressive, they'll give you time and then you can talk about it later. And then there's no need for fighting or forgiveness. So there's different levels of communication with it. So I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Thank you, Amadeus. We're going to figure out how to do this a little bit more smoother. We're still work in progress, but we've got great people. Great. We've got Mark and Keith and Jackie and hi, guys. And they are wonderful and working hard, and we're going to get this together. And guess what? We're going to have another event coming up next fall with James Von Prague. So that's going to be fun, and we'll talk more about that. And we've got other events. My event on December 22nd at Storm Wisdom has already been sold out, but we will have other events coming up. And I hope you will participate in these classes. He's writing me a note.
Christina with Angels.
What did you just say?
Oh, also special thank you to Christina, who does the angel membership.
Oh, Christina, she's wonderful. She does all the angel memberships for us, and she's wonderful. You probably have spoken to her, so we adore Christina. So, and Izzy, and so anyway, I will talk to you next week. Get prepared with readings. Now, if you want a reading next week, I think rather than throwing your fishing pole in the water and seeing what you can catch, I'd like you to put the bait out. So if you want to talk to Uncle George, tell me. I want to talk to Uncle George. I'll then see if Uncle George is here, and we'll talk to Uncle George, rather than saying, I just want to know if there's a message somewhere from the great beyond where I may get somebody that was your great Aunt Mildred's second cousin's brother who wants to say hello to you, and it matters not to you. So make sure that we do it that way, okay? And I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Absolutely delightful evening, Melinda, and thank you very much for the course on forgiveness. And I do understand that we will have a calendar of events coming out in the coming year, and we're going to have a whole list of different programs and different modules that you'll be teaching, and it is absolutely going to be a fantastic forum for learning, and you can do it right at home, and it'll be such a comfortable place for folks.
Yeah, thank you, Amadeus.
Thank you. Good night, Melinda.
Good night. Good night, everybody.